From inside the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and John Meoli live on a Wednesday in November. John, the days have gotten shorter, which means the stove has gotten hotter. I misspoke the other day when I said free agency started right after the World Series. What I meant was all players become free agents after the World Series, those who are slated to become free agents. But free agency technically starts in earnest, as in teams can start signing players tomorrow at 5 p.m. The stove is about to heat up.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting how it fell with the World Series ending on a Saturday and then like option decisions and all that stuff just happening on a Monday. It didn't feel like there was any time in between, although there was like a full day. Plus, it didn't feel like there was because Sunday is, for a certain demographic, like dealing with daylight savings time with small children and like figuring out how your life is going to go like after Halloween. You just kind of focus on that more than roster mechanics and stuff. But
the people that are in that demographic are you and Craig Albernaz, to be clear.
Yeah. Venn diagram, people in that demographic and people who are tired, very concentric circles at the moment.
Yeah. Well, we have already gotten some moves made by the Baltimore Orioles, some options that have been declined, some options that have been picked up, and some that have been reacquired and we assume are going to be picked up. We'll talk about all of that in just a bit. But first, we have to read out a review by Cast Chass on Apple Podcasts, a 5-star review. Yes. I will read it out here on the show. Yes, they say, this is my favorite podcast, not just my favorite Orioles podcast, but my favorite overall podcast. That's high praise. Paul and John are so knowledgeable and fun. Go O's, 162-0 in 2026. I like the optimism.
Paul, I have a question that's completely unrelated to this, and I have been very clear about the time constraints I have today, which are not going to be served by me asking you this question.
Sure.
But I heard reference to like
time constraints for you, no financial constraints for David Rubenstein. Go ahead.
Yeah, those are just consistent. Those are durable traits, but for both of us, I have very little time, and he has plenty of money as he finds all kinds of ways to tell us every time he speaks.
Yep.
Would you consider this like there's, I've heard podcasts referred to as like chemistry or conversational podcasts versus like informational.
Sure.
I don't know why I wouldn't have thought of ours as the former, but I think it is.
Yeah. I think we walk a fine line, but I think that we stray more to conversational. Yeah. Once we start talking about Blame Pie and your Marshall's clothing purchases, I think that's when it strays into, and Taylor Swift, of course, which many of our viewers on YouTube, Facebook, X hate. But some listeners on any of your favorite podcast platforms like.
Is it still that one guy who said he didn't want to hear teenage music like a year ago? Or are we still?
Who knows? You just copy and paste the same guy.
Yeah, that guy.
The same middle-aged guy that is complaining in our comments about not talking about Taylor Swift. We're going to talk about whatever we want, unfortunately.
It's like there was a guy when I worked at The Sun who... it was like Memorial Day. I'll never forget it. Memorial Day 2021. He sent like a 19-point email to the entire newspaper staff about how bad I was at covering the Orioles. And like this trade was terrible and that trade was terrible. And Michael Elias should go to jail and this and that. Former state delegate. Wow. I don't know if I said state senator or state delegate. And it like, I made the mistake of reading it and just got mad. But I've never forgotten it. And mostly never forgot it because no one like above me who like got it, responded to it and was like, hey man, or like mention it to me.
Yeah.
And, these things, like the person who told us not to talk about teenage girl music, those things stick with you.
They do, unfortunately. But
time constraints.
We have to, time constraints. And also, we should let the 5-star reviews stick with us just as much as the criticism.
I glow when people give us 5-star reviews. I can't believe it. It's so great.
It is so nice. All right. Speaking of glowing, Craig Albernaz, in his introductory press conference yesterday, as the new manager of the Baltimore Orioles, was positively glowing, as was his daughter, Gigi, the 2-year-old who sat on his lap for about half of that press conference. She really stole the show. If you haven't watched the video, you should. One of 3 kids for the Albernazes, and I feel bad because the 2 sons in this situation definitely got the short end of the stick. We're talking about CJ, who's 8 years old, and Norman, who's 6 years old. CJ, of course, at 8 years old, is very aware of and loves the 6-7 bit as he made his dad perform. And then at the end of the press conference, everybody's already departing. CJ runs up to the microphone and just yells 6-7 just to get it in there. But it's going to be a bummer for those guys when they look back at the press conference in years' time and say, why did Gigi get to be the star of the show?
Yeah. Also very difficult for boys that age to sit still for like an hour and hear people talk. Like, shout out to them for that. That was really difficult. They did a great job. I could tell. And I think this is most important. I I could tell they were like being really helpful with their sister too. That's good big brother stuff. I'm about it.
It was great. In attendance at that press conference, by the way, Guardians manager Stephen Vogt showed up to see his best friend get that job. And John, you wrote a story on thebanner.com where people can subscribe $1 for 6 months about the introductory press conference. And my takeaways are largely the same as yours, which is that Craig Albernaz could not have made a better first impression. Now, we're in the honeymoon phase. This is very early. They haven't even started spring training, but this is about as good a introductory press conference as you could ask for from a new manager. He handled all the questions well. He said and did all the right things. I think that just based on the press conference alone, it's easy to see why Mike Elias, why Orioles leadership, why David Rubenstein was comfortable making him the new face of the franchise.
Yeah. And I think you saw a lot of the things that you read. I knew we were going to do this podcast, obviously, for many days before yesterday. And I thought about it since. Like, it's hard to say bad stuff about what we saw. And it's going to seem like we're only saying like really glowing stuff. And that's like just natural for how it went. But also it would just be like even one little grain of sand in like the gears here that were like, wait, what's this guy doing? Or what's this guy saying? Would be like such a red flag that it would get called out. But I just don't think there was anything like that. But broadly, yes, this was somebody who you hear is an incredibly engaging person, who is an incredibly passionate and detail-oriented person who leaves a string of allies and supporters and people who love him everywhere he goes. I mean, you saw all the reasons why in this. You know, he's matching down to like the design on the inside of his collar with his sons. You know, they're all wearing matching shoes. He's got the Oriole bird inside of his shirt, coat, jacket, or jacket lapel, whatever you want to call it. He is making jokes like with David Rubenstein and Mike Elias. He's making Mike Elias laugh. Mike Elias was making some funny faces. It's like skeptical faces on the dais, and he was also laughing.
It's hard to make Mike Elias laugh. I speak from experience.
Yeah, no, I don't try that much on purpose, although I'm sure he reads things that I say and laughs at how dumb they are. But it was somebody who all the things that you heard about were kind of on display. And truth be told, I don't remember even a little bit about Brandon Hyde's introductory press conference. I couldn't tell you what was said or what he said or what
I don't remember
happened.
a whole lot either.
And
it was 7 years ago.
And that's not to say that it was bad, but it was, you know, we might remember some stuff about this. And I think that kind of speaks to what the Orioles were signing up for here.
Yeah, I think in terms of his personality, immediately Craig Albernaz comes off as authentic, which is the number one word I think that we heard about him before he got hired, after he got hired, from people who worked with him and knew him. Yeah. The other word that I came to mind was disarming. I mean, he immediately is making jokes about himself. He's immediately setting himself up to be made fun of, talking about his height, you know, talking about how he set himself up, his kids put him up for the 6'7" joke. Like, there are so many things that immediately you feel comfortable with this guy in a way that I think is kind of uncommon when it comes to baseball managers. I think oftentimes they're older, gruffer guys that sometimes takes a little bit of picking at in order to get to the soft center. Craig Albernaz is who he is. He comes off as very authentic, and I think that is going to be bared out throughout his tenure in Baltimore.
Yeah, and I think it speaks a lot to me what his job is. You know, he made the joke about Mike Elias cooking in the offseason. I don't think it was a joke in the way that he intended it to be. I think people laugh for their own reasons on that, given how last offseason went. But you know, that's all Mike and David Rubenstein and, you know, adding players, all the stuff that you would think is going to be the reason why the Orioles are good this year. But his job is to get this team and the guys who are in there back to themselves. Themselves is like, you know, Gunnar Henderson being like a 7-win player instead of a 4-something win player. Adley Rutschman being a 5-win player instead of a 2-win player. Colton Cowser, we can go on down the line. These guys, if these guys are healthy and performing, they're going to be really good. But part of that is like enjoying themselves. This was going back to like the end of 2024. This has been a largely joyless experience. This team has slogged through the better part of 18 months, and it would be bad if they were having fun and being terrible. We've seen teams that were carefree and terrible, and that's not super fun either. And you don't really take those teams seriously. But part of the charm of the 2023 Orioles as they were coming into their own was they were doing all kinds of dumb stuff. We were talking about this with the Teletubby suits and all the
Homer hose and
all the
stuff.
nonsense that they were doing, which you can do when you are playing well. Craig Albernaz will not have that be a requirement. He will let that be like its own self-fulfilling prophecy, just by him being the person that he's been, that we've been told and read that he is, and by being the person we saw yesterday, he will allow them to do all the things that they want to do on and off the field to be themselves. And themselves is like kind of doofs in a good way, but also good baseball players. And they haven't really been either of those things to the extent that they want to in the last year.
Absolutely. And he said culture is set by the players. He talked about how it's all about the boys. I told you, John, last week, he loves saying boys.
Did we do a boys counter?
No, I don't think we did a boys counter. Maybe on next podcast. If we look through the entire transcript and do a Command F, try to find out how many times he said boys.
Yeah. I don't want to not listen to you by doing that, but I'm going to do it.
I mean, it's going to be, the total for the season is going to be astronomical. Loves referring to his players as the boys, but he also talked about how leadership can come from anywhere. Leadership can come from a veteran guy on the team. It can come from a young guy who is stepping up. And he understands that this is not going to be a top-down culture, that the Orioles are not going to sit there in the front office and in the manager's office and decide how they want their team to go about their business. It has to be decided by the players, but also with some checks and balances from the coaching staff as well. He also displayed emotional intelligence, which I think is an important thing for a manager to have, for any human being to have, period. But he talked about how he didn't want to get emotional when talking about some of his friends, like Stephen Vogt, who got who was there sitting in the front row, his buddy who got the Nationals managerial job. He clearly has an emotional investment in this team and in the people around him. Some interesting sound bites that I want to play for you guys. The first one, I think we've had a lot of conversations, John, about how this new manager needs to be able to poke and prod at guys that need poking and prodding, but also understand how to approach players who need to get better. And he talked about having tough conversations. And I think it was an important one to have. Here was his quote on that.
It's funny, when I first started coaching in the minor leagues, I remember talking to my wife Genevieve of now that I'm a coach, do I have to change who I am? Do I have to change the music I listen to? And it was just a joke and laughing, but I'm just going to be me. That's all I know. Players want to know who's in their corner that's authentic and real, and they need a sounding board and someone that they can talk to. And tough conversations always happen. It's a part of the game. I'm not scared to have a tough conversation, do it all the time, but when it comes from a place of truth and a place of care and love, you have to have those tough conversations. And like Joe Madden said it, years ago, that if you tell a player the truth, he might be mad at you for a day. If you lie to him, you lost him forever. So that's something where we have to be truthful and honest, but also, I'm going to keep it loose. It's baseball. We're with each other 162 games for the season. We're with each other more than our families. And it's baseball. And guys play at the best when they're having fun and just playing the kids' game.
Yeah, I love the Joe Madden turn on the teach a man to fish. He feeds for a lifetime. I love his version of that phrase. And I think that honesty, genuineness is going to be a staple of Craig Albernaz's tenure.
Yeah, and I think to that note, there's going to be a period, and this is something the Orioles went into this with as they decided to move on from Tony Mansolino, and it turns out a lot of the staff too, is that there's going to be a period of getting to know these guys for the new staff and the new manager and the new coaches who are trying to get to that point where you can have those tough conversations. But that's going to be important. He mentioned a couple of times also focusing on player strengths. You want to try to cover up some of the weaknesses and improve those. But I think that an underrated, we're going to talk about, it's not blame pie. It's just what's going on pie, is that plenty of focus has been put on the faults and flaws of some of these players this year. And really the last 18 months as we talk about kind of the downturn. And Craig Albernaz is going to meet with Jackson Holliday and say, wow, you were basically 22 years old that whole season. You played every single day. You grinded through it. You had some tough times. You made really good swing decisions. You had some periods where you didn't, but he's going to tell them exactly what he thinks they are good at. And that's going to feel really good. And that's going to be a good starting point. It's not going to be, oh, I need you to hit more home runs, or, oh, you should probably try not to hit more home runs and walk more. He's going to tell them exactly what they're good at. And that's going to make a difference. And that's where this is all going to start. There are going to be those conversations that need to happen that aren't as fun as that. But this, everything he said, Michael Elias said about him, and kind of everything that I took away from that was, this is somebody who is going to put the right amount of responsibility and kind of power with the players. And that is, I don't think it's saying that is to say that didn't happen in the past few years. It's just, you can kind of wipe the slate clean now. There's a new manager. There's going to be a bunch of new coaches. There's going to be a new chance to make an impression, new chance to show who you are, not who you used to be. If you were a goof and you don't want to be a goof, you can just not be a goof. If you want to get back to being a little more of a fun guy, you can do that. You don't have to worry about what somebody else told you should be or it shouldn't be. But just the idea that you can kind of have these new building blocks and kind of go in that direction, whatever you think that right direction is going to make such a difference for this team.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know that, as he reiterated, players want to be coached. Players want to get better.
Yeah.
Because they want to make the most amount of money that they can in this league. They want to be the most successful that they possibly can in this league. And so they come from a perspective of wanting your instruction. You just have to be the right deliverer, and you have to do it the right way.
Yeah.
He spoke more about that later on in the press conference.
Players just want to be coached. And that's what I learned. Players just want to get better, even if they play. The reason why guys play 10 years in the big leagues is because they continually get better. And for me, and so, and players just want to know that you have their right interests in mind, and to get them better. There's no ulterior motives. They want to. All players want to make as much money as they can. And they want coaches in their corner, people in their corner that can help them do that. And also, by turn, it helps them, helps the team they're with win a lot of games. And, players see through when you're being fake. So you have to be a truth teller. You have to be authentic to yourself. And that's something that I pride myself on ever since I first started coaching. And that's something that's never going to change.
A truth teller is important there. And I think Gigi was being a truth teller as well. I have no idea what she was trying to tell her dad, but she had something very important to say in the middle of that press conference. And she was testing her dad's managerial skills to be able to balance her on his lap while also answering a very important question.
Yeah. Not easy to do, not easy to do. That's like,
do you ever have a child on your lap while you're finishing an article, John?
I have completed work in my life with a small child on my lap, and it's much more difficult to do that sitting at a laptop versus in front of a microphone. I barely can speak into a microphone without a child sitting on my lap, but there are buttons that they like to press on a laptop too. So you have to kind of hold it far enough out that you can do what you need to do while sitting at the table. I was just doing that on Monday actually, and it was okay.
Yeah, nice.
It was okay.
Well, that's impressive. We should also talk about what David Rubenstein, Orioles control owner, had to say during this press conference. Talked about there being, quote, no particular constraints, end quote, on roster construction, on spending. He said similar things back in February. He said that back in spring training that there really is no limit to the amount that the Orioles can spend. But he also said we're not looking to break records on how they are going to spend, that they are going to have the funds they need to upgrade the roster how they need to. I don't think Michael Elias is going to change his stripes all of a sudden, John. I don't think that he's going to go out and spend like the Dodgers. But we've said before, I still think Michael Elias is going to spend more this offseason than he ever has. I don't know by how much. It could be by an extra $1 million. But I do expect Michael Elias to break his personal record for spending in an offseason.
Yeah, that feels, cumulative, sure, because if you sign one player to a 5-year, $150 million contract, that will be more.
Yep.
That will be more. I am trying to I know that the year-over-year increase was significant and the largest in baseball, as they will tell you percentage-wise. I also think that if we say, and I'm just throwing out a number because I don't want to be looking it up as I'm talking and do a bad job at both of those things, but if we say that they added $50 million in free agent salary last year, which is probably close to what it was with,
I mean,
Charlie Morton, Tomoyuki Sugano, Tyler O'Neill. That's probably like
I think it was
40
about
some.
Yeah, O'Neill was. If you are you talking just
in 2025?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah,
Yeah. So
I would say about $45 million, maybe.
Yeah. Plus, Ramon Laureano, plus Andrew Kittredge, plus a couple. I don't know what else, but
Dylan Carlson.
yeah. If they add that much on two players, and those are two big time players for 2026, who are obviously going to be signed for longer term than that, will that be like a bigger offseason? I don't think that they didn't have that money available. I think that the opportunity set shifted as the offseason was going on, and they just did what they could do. Like once Max Fried goes off the board, you can't just generate another Max Fried. Like once Blake Snell signs with the Dodgers, there's no more Blake Snells out there to sign. You kind of have to figure out something to do that will get you to a place that you feel good about.
Once Corbin Burns signs with the Arizona Diamondbacks, the Burns contract would have broken records for the Orioles for Mike Elias.
Yeah.
And once he left, it was like, all right, we don't feel comfortable in spending that kind of money on just about anybody else.
Yeah. And it would have been, significant in that they spent all that money and then he blew out.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
So I think, I believe him when he says there's no constraints. I believe him when he says that there's no limit. I also believe that they're not going to set any payroll records, because I think that when we talked a couple weeks ago about the Blue Jays, they spent a lot of money and they did it over time. It wasn't that they signed George Springer and Kevin Gossman and Chris Bassett and whoever else to these big contracts all in the same offseason. Like they're like early days, like Steve Cohen Mets. They did that one year, and you spread it out. And that's how you end up with a good, talented team. And then you can kind of iron out the ups and downs of those contracts as you can. So I think that's true, but we will just keep going back to the idea of how are the Orioles going to apply that within their framework, within their valuation model, within their methodology to actually make it happen.
Right.
And that is where we don't know, but on its face, yes, I'm sure that they don't have any. I'm sure they're not sitting around, at the beginning of October having a meeting with Mike about what the budget's going to be, and they give him a number. Like if he comes to them with, I'm just going to throw out Alex Bregman because that's what I've been doing for like a year. But like if he's like, hey, we can do this for this amount, they're not going to be, oh, sorry, we thought we were only going to commit to spending like $100 million long term. I'm making up numbers and making up people. They're not going to do that.
Right.
They probably wouldn't have done it last year, and they're definitely not going to do it this year after they saw what happened to this team in the ballpark and all this stuff.
Exactly. All right, let's talk about the coaching staff changes, because we've seen even more turnover in that department. John, bench coach Robinson Chirinos, according to our own Andy Kuska, is leaving the organization. He was under contract through the season, but is seeking opportunities with other organizations. So just a 1-year stint for Robinson Chirinos as bench coach. We already saw departures from assistant hitting coaches Sherman Johnson and Tommy Joseph, and now the lead hitting coach for the Baltimore Orioles is also leaving. Cody Asche is departing to become the assistant hitting coach for the Detroit Tigers, and first base coach Anthony Sanders is going to be the first base coach for the Detroit Tigers as well. You look at the Orioles website for coaches, it's Craig Albernaz, and then it's 5 guys under there who are no longer in the organization, including Tony Mansolino. Who is left on this coaching staff? It's pitching coach Drew French, interim bullpen / assistant pitching coach Mitch Plasmeyer, interim third base / infield coach Buck Britton, pitching strategy coach Ryan Klimek, major league development coach Grant Anders, senior advisor John Mabry. John, I know a lot of Orioles fans in some corners of Baltimore and around the globe were celebrating when they saw the news that Cody Asche was departing.
It's a weird thing to do.
It is a weird thing to do, but that's something that Orioles fans, I'm sure, were happy about, because this hitting operation underperformed in the one season that Cody Asche was their hitting coach. They had Ryan Fuller, Matt Borg-Schulte in 2024. They promote Cody Asche. Things did not go well on the hitting side. How much of that is his fault, we discussed on a previous episode. But Cody Asche is out the door. That really gives Craig Albernaz the ability to hire his own hitting staff from the ground up. As you said last week, John, it seems like the pitching operation is going to stay mostly as is, with Drew French and Mitch Plasmeyer, really struggling with Mitch Plasmeyer's name today.
Yeah.
Running that side of things. But on the hitting side.
And Klimek was there yesterday. I saw him looking very sharp in a suit. So
yes,
shout out to him. He was in attendance at the press conference.
So that's a good sign for him as well.
Yeah.
But on the hitting side, it seems like they can really start from ground zero and build this thing up.
They can. And I wrote about this last week at thebanner.com, which I believe you've already done the bit about.
You can do it again.
Okay.
People can subscribe.
6 months, $1 if you want to. That it felt like something meaningful was happening if they were going to turn over the hitting side again and start from scratch. Paul, I ask you, why was 2025 so disappointing for the Baltimore Orioles?
How long do we have?
Well,
time constraints.
Well, not what happened, but why it was disappointing, because this was a team that won 101 and then 91 games and had high expectations. 75. Why did they have high expectations? Because they have this really, really promising and talented homegrown lineup, pretty much top to bottom, every position, 3 All-Stars already, guys who were in the Rookie of the Year mix, and Colton Cowser, guys who are coming up. The reason that the expectations were so high, and by extension of that, the disappointment was so stark, and why the 2025 season was bad. Yeah, the pitching was brutal in the first couple months of the season, but the only reason the expectations were high, nobody had high hopes for the pitching staff. Nobody looked at that group and was like, they're going to be leading the majors in ERA in the middle of June, just like last year. Like nobody, that was literally no one. But they looked at the lineup and were like, these are really, really good hitters. Why? Because the Orioles drafted them high, yes. And they developed them through this program with Cody Asche and all these people who have been in the mix for a long time, doing what they do well and getting these guys to the big leagues. The expectations were high because of that. And if you can identify what made the Orioles good over the stretch of this decade that they were good, it was largely because of the hitting program that brought these guys that they scouted and signed to the majors and made them good players. So the idea that they're going to change, I'm not saying it doesn't need to happen. It just feels like a notable shift. I'm not sure this is going to be Craig Albernaz. Like, I'm saying, I know these guys from Driveline. Let's go do this. Let's get, I don't know who's making this call. I'm sure it's going to be a collaborative thing. I think there needs to be it can't just be him, because there's a lot of trickle down to how the minor league hitting operation works too with the big league. And I think this is going to be collaborative, but I'm just flagging that this is a meaningful thing that the Orioles are doing. And I'm not saying it didn't need to be done. Nobody is saying like this was a good season. The season started really poorly after they traded away most of the good players, and a lot of the other good players were hurt. It ended really poorly too, but it means something that they're doing this. And I don't know if starting from scratch is the right term for it, but they are going to have to go backwards in some senses in terms of like relationship building and program building to go forward, which is not necessarily a trajectory that you would think of when you're talking about let's get the 2026 Orioles back to the playoffs.
Sure. In terms of how much hiring power Craig Albernaz will have, Mike Elias was asked about it yesterday. He said, we definitely want the ability for him to put his stamp on the staff. So
yes,
it's going to be a collaborative process, but it seems like Craig Albernaz, at least according to Mike Elias, will have a large say in who is hired there.
Yeah, we're not going to call them the friend spots, but like the fundamental spot. The Orioles need a first base. They need a base coach. Buck Britton's future not reported on. Nobody really knows, but you would think that because he has not been included in any of these conversations and stories that he'd be back. I don't know if he's a base coach. I don't know what role he would be in, but you have a bench coach type role, probably have a major league coach role to fill in for the fundamentals side. And if Craig Albernaz wants those, and the hitting side could be independent. It could be somebody he knows, somebody he likes, but his stamp can come outside the hitting department is kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about one guy that I think these hitting coaches will deal with a lot this season. Deal with. I don't know. We'll work with a lot this season.
I don't even know who you're going to talk about. I'm not looking at the agenda right now, but I thought that was funny.
Well, it's not somebody who is a part of their homegrown core. It is somebody that they brought in as a free agent last offseason. That's Tyler O'Neill.
Yeah, I'm sure they hope they get to deal with him.
I'm sure they do. This was a fait accompli, but Tyler O'Neill is not opting out of his contract with the Orioles. He opts in to the latter 2 years, 2026 and 2027, gets paid $16.5 million each of those years. There is no opt-out again after 2026. So this was the only opportunity for him to get out of the contract. Put that in the contract because he was coming off a very good year in Boston. If he kept that going, might have been able to hit free agency again and cash in. Well, that's not what happened. Played in just 54 games this season. That was his lowest total since 2020. Hit 199 with 9 homers and 98 OPS plus. Was worth negative 0.64 according to Baseball Reference. I think there are questions about what kind of role he will play in 2026 because you look at the starting outfield right now, not too many answers. You got Colton Cowser for sure will be in the outfield next year, whether it's in center or a corner. Dylan Beavers showed a lot in that final month. Whether the Orioles think of him as a starter or as a platoon player, we shall see, but he definitely deserves a role there. And then Tyler O'Neill is really your only right-handed hitting outfielder that you can count on other than perhaps Jeremiah Jackson. So there are really not a whole lot of answers in the outfield. And just by nature of the fact that he's here and he hits from the right side might just give him that spot. But I think the Orioles absolutely need to be looking at an upgrade again to that outfield.
Yeah, there seems like there's a role for someone out there to come in and do that. You could ideally get somebody who's right-handed and kind of balance that out, which is also the Heston Kjerstad of it all, kind of like lingering out there in the ether of whether he's going to be in the mix. But I think there's an opportunity for a right-handed bat. On the Tyler O'Neill part, I don't begrudge him even one bit for doing what he did.
No.
He's entitled to this, and the Orioles are entitled to be like, hey, cool, no hard feelings. Let's be a lot better. Let's be on the field for 130 games and let's be somebody we can count on.
Yep. This is like the Adam Jones, when there were certain members of the organization that weren't crazy about Adam Jones exercising his no trade clause and deciding to stay in Baltimore.
Yeah.
You signed the contract.
You can do this.
You should have given Tyler O'Neill 3 years if you didn't expect him to take all 3 years.
Yeah. There's no, I can't imagine
say that there is. Not to say we've heard from anybody in the org that they're upset about this, but
no, I'm sure it would have been the biggest surprise in the world if he didn't. And you can, for all the reasons that are obvious, but I think there's going to be one good year of Tyler O'Neill with the Orioles. If it's next year, there's probably not going to be another year after that because someone else would, I'm sure, happily pay $16 million for the idea of good Tyler O'Neill, and the Orioles would probably happily take whatever that team would offer them at that point. But I am relatively convicted that one of these 2 years is going to be good. Even if it's not this year, the expectations will be so low for 2027 that he will probably, just by virtue of drawing breath, exceed them. But I feel like there's a chance that he can be the player the Orioles sign for at least one of these years. There's going to be an opportunity for someone to be in there. Otherwise, I think going into spring training, given how Colton Cowser's season went, given Dylan Beavers has very limited major league experience, and typically there's going to be some kind of adjustment period for him once teams get a full offseason to game plan for him. You're going to want another body in there, as Ramon Laureano style, like Tyler O'Neill insurance / maybe you'll end up playing 20 games in April too.
Yeah, exactly. One guy who did not have his team option picked up by the Baltimore Orioles, Jorge Mateo, 30 years old, was due $5.5 million on that team option. The Orioles do not exercise it. As we know, Jorge Mateo, his best season with the Orioles came in 2022 after he was picked up off waivers the year before. He registered 3.7 Baseball Reference WAR that season, despite posting an 86 OPS plus. He was 14% worse than the average hitter in MLB and still had 3.7 WAR because his defense was just that good, and somehow he didn't win a Gold Glove. Played in just 68 games in 2024 when he collided with Gunnar Henderson trying to catch a pop-up, I believe, in Houston in July. Got Tommy John surgery, was out for the season. This past season, was a big old struggle for Jorge Mateo. He had elbow inflammation, then a hamstring strain on his rehab assignment. His defensive stats pretty much completely dropped off the table after that 2022 season. He always had the speed, was always a good base runner, and that's why he held his spot on the Orioles roster, but his hitting continued to stay poor, and his defense dropped off the table. So Jorge Mateo, I think unless he's willing to take a minor league contract from this team, I think it's unlikely that he's going to be back in Baltimore in 2026. Yep. That's all John has to say about that.
I don't know. It's a sound decision.
Yes.
It's a sound decision, and there's an opportunity cost. The Orioles traded Ramon Urias because they were going to pay him like $5 million to be an overqualified, probably like bench infielder who can do some things offensively and is really good defensively. They moved on because that's a lot of money for that role, and it's hard to lock yourself into that and limits upside because eventually you're not going to be able to have that forever. And
Yeah.
same thing with Jorge Mateo. You know, there was plenty of value to having Jorge Mateo doing what he did when he was doing it. And we've seen over a number of years that as his playing time has waned, and you saw it even in 2022 when like once Gunnar Henderson came up, he was not the same defender when he was not playing shortstop every day. And it's been a couple years of not being the same player when he's not playing every day.
Yeah.
And it's hard to make that kind of impact when you're playing once or twice a week, and it's hard to justify that kind of money when you're playing once or twice a week. So
yep.
The Orioles will move on.
Yep. And they still need to add some kind of utility man, I think, this season. I mean,
Yes.
I think Jeremiah Jackson showed a lot that we were not expecting.
Yeah.
And I guess he can theoretically still play in the outfield as well as the infield. They have Luis Vasquez, but other than those guys, I think you still need a proven big league utility man in that spot. All right. One more decision that we need to talk about, and that's a trade. The Orioles reacquired their old friend, Andrew Kittredge, for cash considerations from the Chicago Cubs. Now, why would they reacquire a player that they just traded away at the deadline? Well, that's because he's got a $9 million club option for 2026. And it appears the Orioles are poised to pick it up and bring Andrew Kittredge, all of 35 years old, back to Baltimore for the 2026 season. A wild yo-yo move by Mike Elias. Andrew Kittredge was hurt to start the 2025 season, but when he pitched, he was solid. 3.41 ERA in 31 1/3 innings. Orioles traded him for shortstop Wilfred De La Cruz, who is in their top 30 according to MLB Pipeline. Pitched pretty well for Chicago, 3.32 ERA in 21 2/3 innings. Did give up 3 earned runs in 5 innings in the postseason. However, the Orioles are going to need bullpen arms next year.
Yeah.
And it seems like they want to bring Andrew Kittredge right on back. That's why partly I was hesitant to say the Orioles were going to trade Andrew Kittredge, was because I thought they were going to want to pick up that option. This way, they get to have their cake and eat it too. They get an extra prospect in trading for him. Cubs get 2 months of him, and the Orioles get him right back.
Yes. I'm going to hold a small piece of space in my heart. I don't think it's been reported firmly they're going to pick up the option. There could have been some chicanery where like this is one of the only deals the Orioles didn't send money in. I think at the deadline, maybe they said, we'll just take him back and we'll decline the option and pay him $1 million if you give us this good prospect.
Yeah. Do you think this was discussed in July?
I don't know. Maybe, but I think if they're going to keep him, you look at the options and you might just have to pay Andrew Kittredge or some person like him who does a similar thing, that much money.
Why not be Andrew Kittredge?
Why not have it be Andrew Kittredge? It's one less thing you have to worry about this offseason. And it's like, you can now look at this Orioles bullpen, provided they pick up his option, which I don't know why they wouldn't, and be like,
imagine trading for him and then not picking up his
that was what I just said. That's what I'm saying. Like,
it would be hilarious.
It would be funny, but it would basically be, they got a pretty good young prospect for Andrew Kittredge. He's probably going to be in like the back end of the top 30 for Baseball America. It didn't give, I'm looking at it right now. I don't see any money that they sent to Chicago for him. Maybe this was I don't know. Maybe it was part of the deal because we don't know that they're actually picking up the option. It's possible, but
right.
But I'm just glad that, because every time trade deadline happens, it's like, oh, this person is an expiring maybe they could trade him and then sign him back, which happens like 1% of the time. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, darn, I yell and scream about that every year. But this technically, he didn't choose to come back. He didn't sign him back. They just traded back for him, which is something that I suppose now we have to account for, but we will definitely forget is a thing this time next year.
He didn't have a choice in the matter, and he might not have a choice in the matter if they just pick up his option.
Or maybe they could flip him to someone else. Who knows? This is like the Andrew Kittredge transaction tree will just grow and grow and grow. Yeah,
this is like Lewin Diaz from a few years ago. All right. That just about does it for the Banner Baseball Show today. We will have another show next week when free agency has officially begun, and we'll start to look ahead to who the Orioles could acquire. this winter. Thanks so much for tuning in. At John Meoli is his handle. Subscribe to his newsletter, Inside the Dugout, which you can find on thebanner.com. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. Andy Kuska, Kyle Goon are also writing great stuff for the Banner.